Why do empires rise and fall? Is it the strength of their enemies or the weakness within themselves? History teaches that division is often more dangerous than conquest. In the Middle Ages, Christendom, once united under one cross, split into rival churches, East and West. While Christians quarreled over power and doctrine, a new force gathered strength beneath the Crescent. This is the story of how unity forged empires, how division destroyed them, and how the cross and the Crescent came to define an age of faith, fire, and survival. In the late Middle Ages, the world of faith was divided. To the east, the Byzantine Empire still clung to its ancient capital, Constantinople, a Christian city that had once commanded half the known world, but now stood isolated, weakened, and surrounded. To the west, the kingdoms of Catholic Europe looked upon the Byzantine East with suspicion. Pope and Patriarch had quarreled for centuries, splitting Christendom into two rival churches, Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox. Their unity was fractured, their strength divided. Meanwhile, across the frontier of Anatolia, a new power stirred beneath the banner of Islam. The Crescent had long pushed into Christian lands, first through the Arab conquest, then through the Seljuk Turks, and now through a rising dynasty of warriors, the Ottomans. For Muslims, this struggle was framed as Gaza, holy war, a duty to spread and defend the faith. For Christians, every lost fortress was not just territory, but a blow against the cross itself. Thus, the stage was set, a divided Christendom facing a united rising force. Long before the crescent banners of the Ottomans reached Europe, the cross itself was divided. What had once been one church fractured into two, Rome in the west, Constantinople in the east. The seeds of this schism lay deep in history. Language, culture, and politics had slowly pulled the two halves of Christendom apart. In the east, Greek was the tongue of theology, and the emperor ruled as both sovereign and protector of the church. In the west, Latin reigned, and the Pope of Rome claimed supreme authority over all Christians. Theologically, disputes festered. The West insisted on adding the Filioque clause to the Nicene Creed, declaring that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. To the Eastern Church, this was not only a corruption of doctrine, but an act of arrogance, made without their consent. There were other quarrels, over whether priests should remain celibate, whether to use unleavened or leavened bread in the Eucharist, even how to interpret the role of icons. Each side saw the other not merely as different, but as dangerous to the purity of the faith. Breaking point came in 1054. Pope Leo IX and Patriarch Michael Cerularius excommunicated each other in what came to be called the Great Schism. From that moment, the unity of Christendom was gone. Historian Dmitry Obolensky calls it a divorce that neither side ever truly forgave. The schism might have been healed, but history only drove the wedge deeper. When the Crusades were launched, they exposed the mistrust between East and West. Latin crusaders, meant to defend Byzantium, often treated Orthodox Christians as heretics. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade shattered any hope of reconciliation. Crusaders stormed Constantinople, looting its churches and installing a Latin emperor. For the Orthodox world, this was not the work of allies, but of traitors. By the 14th century, the Christian world was a house divided. The Catholic West mistrusted the Orthodox East. The Byzantines feared the ambitions of the Pope as much as they feared the armies of the Sultan. As historian John Julius Norwich writes, the Eastern Empire, once the bulwark of Christendom, now stood alone, unloved by the West it had protected for centuries. And so, when the Ottomans raised the banner of Gaza, they faced not a united Christendom, but one fractured by pride, doctrine, and betrayal. The cross was broken, and the Crescent was rising. While Christendom tore itself apart, the Crescent was advancing. From the deserts of Arabia in the 7th century, Islam spread with astonishing speed. Within a century of the Prophet's death, Muslim armies had swept across the Middle East, North Africa, and into Europe itself. Historian Hugh Kennedy notes, the speed of the Muslim conquests shocked contemporaries who had seen the Roman and Persian empires as eternal. These were not only military expansions, but also spiritual missions. The idea of jihad combined faith with the sword. Chronicler Theophanes the Confessor writing in the 9th century, lamented that the Byzantines were stripped of the provinces of the east by the Ishmaelites, a sign, he believed, of divine judgment. By the 13th century, the Islamic world was fractured too. Arabs, Persians, Seljuks, Mamluks, each vying for power. But while they fought among themselves, the idea of jihad against the Christian world remained a unifying thread. The banner of the Crescent continued to advance, step by step, while the cross grew more divided. And into this world of broken empires and holy wars would rise a new power, fierce, disciplined, and guided by the dream of conquest. The Ottomans, heirs of the Ghazi warriors, who would carry the Crescent to heights unseen since the days of the caliphs. Legend tells us that Osman, the son of Ertugrul, once dreamed of a great tree rising from his chest. Its branches stretched over mountains and rivers, casting shade across continents. At its roots, pure waters flowed, giving life to the land. When Osman awoke, a wise sheikh told him, "Your descendants will rule over a vast empire. God has chosen your house for greatness." This dream was not just a tale, it became a vision. Osman and his followers were not kings of an established state, but frontier warriors, ghazis, living on the edge of the crumbling Byzantine world. To them, raiding Christian lands was both survival and sacred duty. Step by step, principality by principality, Osman and his heirs turned this vision into reality. Around 1299, Osman declared independence from his Seljuk overlords. His warriors seized Byzantine forts and towns, pushing ever deeper into their weakened territory. The Ghazi ideal, holy war against unbelievers, gave his people unity and purpose. His son Orhan carried the dream forward. By capturing Bursa in 1326, the Ottomans gained not only a new capital, but also wealth, artisans, and legitimacy. It was the first true jewel in their crown. One victory followed another. In 1354, under Orhan's son, Suleiman, the Ottomans crossed into Europe, taking Gallipoli after an earthquake destroyed its walls. This was no mere raid. It was the planting of a flag on European soil. From there, the Ottomans grew with unstoppable momentum. They absorbed rival Turkish principalities in Anatolia, outmaneuvered fractious Byzantine emperors, and offered defeated foes a choice: join their system or be destroyed. Through alliances, marriages, and relentless campaigning, the tree from Osman's dreams spread its roots. By the time of Murad I in the late 14th century, the Ottomans had become more than raiders. They were a dynasty, a state, and a rising empire. Osman's dream was the seed, but it was the Ottomans' ingenuity that turned it into an empire. At first, they were just a band of ghazis, frontier warriors raiding Byzantine lands for survival and honor. Yet these raids were more than plunder. They were the crucible in which a state was forged. Discipline, strategy, and adaptability became their hallmarks. Unlike other Anatolian beyliks, the Ottomans absorbed their enemies rather than annihilate them. They offered protection and opportunity to conquered peoples, Christians and Muslims alike, if they joined the Ottoman system. This pragmatism allowed their forces to grow without the endless rebellions that crippled rival principalities. The devshirme system, introduced in the 14th century, turned one of Christendom's most vulnerable points into strength. Christian boys from conquered lands were taken, converted to Islam, and trained as Janissaries, elite soldiers and administrators loyal only to the Sultan. Historian Caroline Finkel writes that this system transformed a patchwork of frontier warriors into an organized military and administrative machine, capable of striking fear across continents. The Ottomans also mastered new technology and tactics. Gunpowder cannons replaced the limits of traditional siege warfare. Cavalry raids were coordinated with infantry formations. Every battle became a lesson in adaptation, and the Ottomans learned faster than their opponents. Even in diplomacy, they excelled. Alliances, marriages, and strategic marriages with neighboring beyliks allowed them to expand peacefully at times, conserving strength for decisive wars. Step by step, town by town, principality by principality, the Crescent grew into a network of power stretching across Anatolia and into the Balkans. By the late 14th century, the Ottomans had become more than raiders. They were a disciplined army, a sophisticated bureaucracy, and a rising empire. Their victories at Nicopolis and Kosovo demonstrated their ability to crush united Christian forces when the latter finally attempted coordination. The Crescent was no longer a threat on the periphery. It was now a force shaping the very heart of Europe. 1453. Constantinople, the jewel of the Byzantine Empire, the city of the cross, the bastion that had withstood invaders for over 1,000 years. Its walls were legendary, its defenders resolute. But the world that once protected it had fractured. The West was divided, the East weakened. Byzantium stood alone. Across the Bosporus, Mehmed II, the young conqueror, surveyed the city that had haunted his dreams. The Crescent was ready. Years of preparation, innovation, and ruthless determination had transformed the Ottomans from frontier raiders into an unstoppable empire. Cannons, unheard of in their power, were brought to bear on the Theodosian walls. Janissaries trained for years to execute coordinated assaults. Yet the greatest feat of all was still to come. Constantinople's harbor, the Golden Horn, was protected by a massive chain. No fleet could enter. Undeterred, Mehmed executed one of history's most audacious maneuvers. Over 50 ships were hauled over greased logs across Galata's hills, bypassing the chain entirely and launched directly into the harbor. This feat stunned the Byzantines, proving that the Crescent could overcome any obstacle: walls, chains, or centuries of seeming invincibility. For 53 days, Constantinople held. Defenders fought with desperation. Citizens prayed behind the cross. Every wall, tower, and gate became a symbol, not just of a city, but of a civilization resisting the tide of history. But the Crescent was relentless. On May 29, 1453, Mehmed's forces breached the walls. The cross that had once seemed invincible was overcome. The Crescent had triumphed. The fall of Constantinople was not just a military conquest. It was the symbol of a world in transformation. Europe would never see the East the same way again. The Ottomans now controlled the gateway between continents, the trade routes that had fueled Byzantine wealth, and a legacy that would shape the destiny of the Mediterranean for centuries. Yet, the story of the Crescent did not end in victory. Empire is fragile, and even the mightiest banners face decline. Just as the cross fell to the Crescent itself would one day face the consequences of division, internal weakness, and the relentless march of time. The Crescent that once triumphed over Constantinople did not shine forever. The decline of the Ottoman Empire was complex, a tapestry of internal struggles, external pressures, and the relentless march of time. Internally, the empire faced corruption, succession crises, and revolts across its vast territories. Historian Caroline Finkel writes in The Ottoman Empire, 1300 to 1650, that, as the Janissaries grew more powerful and politicized, the discipline that had made the empire strong began to falter. Provincial governors, once loyal, often acted as independent rulers, draining resources from the center. Economically, the empire struggled to adapt to changing global trade. European powers bypassed Ottoman trade routes, creating inflation and financial strain. According to Halil Inalcik, the empire's economic foundations weakened not because of conquest alone, but because of a world in motion that left it behind. Externally, European powers regained strength. The Holy League defeated the Ottoman navy at Lepanto in 1571, and chronicler Paolo Peruta wrote of it as the greatest blow ever dealt to the Crescent upon the sea. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the empire was called the sick man of Europe, a phrase attributed to Tsar Nicholas I of Russia in 1853, reflecting how foreign powers now saw what had once been an unstoppable empire. Nationalist movements, Greeks, Serbs, Bulgarians, and Arabs, tore at the fabric of Ottoman unity. A Greek revolutionary wrote in 1821, "We fight not only for ourselves but to bring down the tyranny of centuries." These uprisings revealed how fragile a multi-ethnic empire could become in the age of nationalism. Even in decline, the Ottomans attempted reform. Sultan Selim III and later Mahmud II sought to modernize the army, centralize administration, and resist European encroachment. But as historian Eugene Rogan notes in The Fall of the Ottomans, reform was always partial, resisted, or too late to match the pace of change. The final collapse came during the First World War. Pulled into conflicts far beyond its control, the empire could not withstand the strain. By 1922, the Sultanate was abolished, and the Crescent that had once stretched across continents was reduced to the Republic of Turkey. The rise and fall of the Ottoman Empire reminds us that power, however formidable, cannot endure without unity. As Finkel observes, a house divided cannot stand, even one built of cannon, faith, and conquest. Just as the cross failed to resist the crescent centuries earlier, the crescent itself ultimately succumbed to its internal fractures and the pressures of a changing world. Disclaimer: this content is for historical reflection only. We do not condone or promote hatred, violence, or discrimination of any kind.